ostensibly deployed there to stop clashes between Druze residents and the Sunni Bedouin tribes. But all they did was join the clashes by taking the side of the Bedouins against the Druze. And meanwhile, the IDF also struck Hezbollah targets in Lebanon's Bekaa region. The Lebanon's central bank banned transactions with Hezbollah's bank. And elsewhere, in the Gaza Strip, there is growing confidence that the Sinu Hamas figure who planned the 7th of October massacre was eliminated, while a bit further south, a Houthi UAV from Yemen was intercepted near the Israeli city of Eilat. Welcome to Boots on the Ground. I'm your host, Yair Pinto, bringing you all the truth about what is happening in Israel. The Syrian government may have declared a ceasefire, but in Suwayda province, deadly clashes continue between armed Druze and Bedouin groups aided by forces loyal to the regime of interim President Abu Muhammad al-Julani, and the number of fatalities from the fighting has exceeded 200 so far as of Wednesday morning, with many more wounded. Regime fighters are sent to calm things down, yet are accused of atrocities against the Druze communities, including summary executions, abuse, and burning homes. And in response, Israel struck regime targets to aid the Druze after warning Damascus, "We oppose your entry into this area." Druze leaders in Israel have expressed fear that their relatives in Syria will be drawn into the bloodbath, and about 30 Israeli Druze men tried to take matters into their own hands, crossing the border and heading towards the Syrian Druze village of Khader. The IDF gently but firmly rounded these citizens up and moved them back into Israeli territory, warning there's guerrilla warfare in the streets. The regime claims that 138 of their military and security personnel have been lost in the last few days, testifying to the intensity of the clashes. However, Israel's government sent an unequivocal message to al-Julani, while according to an Axios report, the Trump administration asked Israel to halt its operations. Meanwhile, next door in Lebanon, an IDF aircraft struck Hezbollah targets in the Bekaa region, and according to the IDF, installations of the Radwan forces used for weapons storage and training were hit. Israeli Defense Minister Israel Katz declared, "If Hezbollah tries to rebuild its raid capability against Israel, we will respond forcefully." And in a related story, Lebanon's central bank issued an order banning licensed financial institutions in the country from any direct or indirect dealings with Hezbollah-linked financial body, El-Qard El-Hassan, according to the Reuters report about this. While all of this was going on in the northern arena, there was also action in the south. Hamas Legislative Council member Faraj El-Rol, one of the senior planners of the 7th of October attacks against Israel, was eliminated in an IDF strike. And according to intelligence reports, he was a main opponent of a ceasefire, so this might help move that forward. And meanwhile, the IDF is fighting for the fourth time in Beit Hanun in Gaza. After more than 600 days of fighting in the Gaza Strip, the mission in Beit Hanun is still not finished. Battalion 9 and their fighters and the fighters of Division 162 are now operating in the area, destroying terror infrastructure and hitting Hamas's underground. At the same time, the Air Force began strikes on Gaza City, and Wednesday morning, after the IDF Arabic language spokesperson's evacuation notice to residents of neighborhoods in the area to move immediately southward to humanitarian zones, the attacks began. TBN Israel's senior Middle East analyst Mati Shoshani will tell us about the arm wrestling amongst the great powers that are active in the Middle East. And against the backdrop of renewed efforts by the Trump administration to restart negotiations with Iran, the United States Secretary of State and the foreign ministers of France, Germany, and Britain sent an ultimatum for Iran to reach a new nuclear agreement. As leverage, they're threatening to renew the so-called snapback sanctions that were part of the 2015 JCPOA nuclear deal. That agreement allows France, Britain, and Germany to reimpose United Nations sanctions on Iran if it breaches its nuclear commitments. After a call with Rubio, a deadline was set to reach a new agreement by the end of August, but Donald Trump sounded different, declaring, "They want to talk. I'm not in a hurry to talk because we destroyed their sites." Guys, we have a lot to talk about today, so let's dive into the details. I'm Yair Pinto, and with me is Mati Shoshani, and today we bring you Boots on the Ground, the news report that lets you know what's happening in Israel on day 649 of the war against Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis in Yemen, the Shia militias in Iraq, and all the other armed groups in this region who are operating under the orders of Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps, which is the head of the crumbling axis of evil in the Middle East. And a moment before we begin, I want to call on you to keep showing up and help us share the truth of what's happening in Israel. To do that, you can hit the subscribe button, leave a comment, leave a like, and share with your friends the truth of what's going on in this land so that they will know how to pray for the peace of Jerusalem. Today, for the sake of our Druze brothers from Israel whose relatives are being slaughtered under the Syria's new regime, let's pray for their safety and open the report with events on Israel's northern arena. On Tuesday at noon, in order to assist the Druze, the IDF began striking Syrian regime military vehicles that had entered El Suwayda. This is a predominantly Druze city in southern Syria. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Defense Minister Israel Katz issued a joint statement saying, "We instructed the IDF to strike immediately regime forces and weapons that were brought into the El Suwayda area on Jabal el-Druz in Syria for regime activity against the Druze in violation of the demilitarization policy that they had decided upon, which bars bringing forces and weapons into southern Syria that endangers Israel." Israeli Air Force fighter jets struck several tanks in the sector as a warning shot to Syria's ruler and a clear message that Israel will not allow harm to the Druze. The statement continued by saying that Israel is committed to preventing harm to the Druze in Syria because of the deep brotherly alliance with our Druze citizens in Israel and the family and historical ties that they have with the Druze in Syria. We are acting.
With Tasty Tom tomato mix, you can cook any of your customers' favorite meals.
No color changing like traffic lights.
It's thick.
We are acting to prevent the Syrian regime from harming them and to ensure the demilitarization of this area adjacent to our border with Syria. The Syrian government protested the Israeli strikes, saying there had been several fatalities amongst the security forces personnel, in addition to several incidents of civilians. There might be some truth to that statement, but what's also undoubtedly true is that the Islamist forces loyal to al-Julani have perpetrated severe atrocities against the country's Druze population. There are reliable reports of dozens of fatalities amongst this population, and the latest incident recalls similar events a few months ago when Islamists in Syria carried out a horrific massacre of Alawites on the coastal plain of Syria. Following the reports of attacks on Druze, Islamists across Syria are posting messages on social media calling for a general mobilization and a march towards suwayda, the largest Druze center in the Middle East. This call is described as greater than a call for jihad, and these messages are coordinated with the new Syrian army. Now, that's some of the big picture stuff. So let's zoom in, boots on the ground style, to what's happening in Suwayda province. The clashes between Druze and the residents in that area and Sunni Bedouin tribal groups supported by troops loyal to the regime continued overnight on Tuesday. Those regime men were sent to that area allegedly to end the clashes and calm the tensions, but according to eyewitness testimonies from that location, they are helping the Bedouins and take part in the atrocities, even being accused of executing Druze civilians. The main clashes are in the city of Suwayda, the provincial capital with the Druze minority and its rural areas. Last night, it was reported that the clashes also spread to the city of Asrafiyat Sahanaya in Damascus's outskirts, where earlier this year, deadly fighting broke out between Druze forces and armed groups. These clashes are another chapter in the long-running conflict between Druze and Bedouins in the area, have so far claimed at least 203 lives amongst Druze, Bedouins, and Syrian regime fighters, and according to the accumulated reports from all sides, these numbers are accurate. They began over the weekend after Bedouin gunmen attacked a Druze youth from Suwayda on the road linking the province to Damascus. Reports say that several gunmen robbed the youth and kidnapped him, later released him in a remote area in serious conditions. And afterwards, some Suwayda residents detained figures from the Bedouin tribes in that area, and then tensions rose up. Control of Suwayda is a key question in the province's tensions. The province is home to Syria's largest Druze community, which is about 700,000 people, which, as I mentioned a moment ago, is the largest concentration of Druze communities in the entire Middle East. These Druze residents fear harassment by the regime, which has been said have plans to, quote, return the Druze to pure Islam, end quote, and otherwise harm their way of life. In April, clashes there between Druze and regime forces already left more than 100 casualties. At present, Israel is operating from the air, preventing tanks and pickup trucks with heavy machine guns on them and gunmen from reaching this area. However, it is difficult to detect gunmen arriving in private vehicles while hiding weapons that cannot be seen by the Air Force drones. They managed to reach several neighborhoods in the city and commit atrocities in that location. So guys, here at TBN Israel, we will continue to pray for the safety of the Druze and every minority suffering under the heavy hand of extremist Islam. Now, we continue with what is happening in the Gaza Strip, and we'll give you the full picture of the fighting against the terrorist organization Hamas. But first, click that subscribe button so that you stay tuned to the truth in real time and never miss another episode of Boots on the Ground. Now, I want to speak briefly about a topic that is not getting much attention anywhere else, and that is the difficult economic situation here in Israel. In the wake of the war, so many Israelis, honest, hard-working men and women, are facing the challenge of starting over from scratch. Their small businesses were closed, their income stopped, their farm was destroyed by rockets, and maybe they even lost their home. Now, they're doing whatever they can do to rebuild their lives, their businesses, and their communities. That's exactly what Arza was built to support. Through its subscription boxes, Arza sources handmade goods directly from small businesses all across Israel and delivers them to your doorstep. Each purchase means real help, steady income for people that are trying to move forward. From artisans to family-run bakeries, every box tells a story of resilience. So guys, if you want to be part of this story, go to www.arzabox.com/TBNIL and use the code TBNIL to get a 10% discount out of your subscription. Again, that's www.arzabox.com/TBNIL. This is a small action with a big impact for Israel. And now, let's get back to the news, and we're shifting our focus to reports from the Gaza Strip where 11 terrorists were eliminated early Wednesday morning in a series of IDF strikes. Amidst all of this kinetic activity, an assessment is growing that Hamas Legislative Council member Faraj El-Ghul was taken out in recent Shin Bet and Air Force operations. El-Ghul was considered a senior target on the Shin Bet list and was, according to the assessments, part of the team that planned the October 7th massacre. The sounds of fighting in Beit Hanun have in recent days been audible for beyond the Strip's borders, and the IDF forces continue to operate there on Tuesday, slowly advancing on the ground with unceasing firepower. But the terrorists of Hamas and other Palestinian groups in the area are hiding underground, so there is a very great guerrilla challenge in that location. Meanwhile, the IDF Arabic language spokesperson, Colonel Avichai Aderi, instructed residents of several Gaza City neighborhoods to evacuate and move south before the IDF begins maneuvering forcefully in that area. After the evacuation notice, the Air Force began softening strikes on Gaza City and additional neighborhoods in the north of the Gaza Strip. The strikes have destroyed terror targets and also encouraged the Gaza population's understandings that it is better to hurry south before the ground forces enter the heart of Gaza City. The London-based newspaper Ashrak al-Awsat reported in recent days that Israel has eliminated many Hamas operatives, amongst them field operatives and former senior figure in the movement. This week, Muhammad Faraj el-Ullah, a Hamas Legislative Council member and the former Justice Minister, was eliminated, along with intelligence operatives and activists in the Hamas social wing and other organizations. The paper also reported, citing sources in Gaza, that Israel took out 4 senior Hamas military wing commanders and additional operatives in the production and engineering branch, and this is said the most important components of the military wing's capabilities. So guys, here at TBN Israel, we will continue to report on every development in the Gaza Strip, and as always, we invite you to be part of the team by sharing our videos on YouTube, leaving a comment, leaving a like, and hitting that subscribe button if you haven't already, and most importantly, praying for the peace of Jerusalem. Now, we turn to TBN Israel's senior Middle East analyst, Mati Shoshani, who will bring us all the latest updates on the recent developments in the Middle East. Mati, against the backdrop of renewed efforts by the Trump administration to restart negotiations with Iran, the United States Secretary of State and the foreign ministers of France, Germany, and Britain have given Iran an ultimatum to reach a new nuclear agreement. In addition, United States President Donald Trump said that Iran hopes to hold talks with the United States, but that he is in no hurry to speak with them. But on top of all of that, Iran continues to issue threats of powerful revenge against Israel, saying that this time they really mean it and we better watch out. Mati, what's going on? Let us know.
Thank you, Yair Pinto. Indeed, the last hours have been dramatic when it relates to the Iranian nuclear program. Yes, this is repeated news that has happened a lot lately, but this time it's coming from a completely different angle. Multiple European countries, the UK, the French, the Germans, are all pushing and pressuring Iran to scale back completely on all their stockpiles of enriched uranium, or else they want to go back to the nuclear agreement from 2015. And let me explain the dramatic effect of what's been happening right now. The Iranians have been, under multiple different agreements, been able to slowly push and build up their stockpiles of enriched uranium. And up till the attack of Israel and then the US on them, they were able to enrich uranium through their centrifuge facilities and stockpile enriched uranium. And right now, multiple European countries are saying, if you don't stop, if you don't scale back completely, if you don't give up on your lack of transparency when it comes to your nuclear program, we want to take into action your snapback mechanism. And what that means is, if they don't have an agreement by the end of August, an automatic snapback mechanism will take effect, and by September, so 30 days after that, all the sanctions that existed back in 2015 will once again be imposed on the Iranians. This is dramatic news. Dramatic for the Iranians, dramatic for the Americans, and dramatic for, very much so, for the peace and regional stability. Now let me explain. Right now we've been waiting. Israel has been waiting. The Americans have been waiting at the aftermath of the ongoing attack, or the 12-day campaign against the Iranians, to see how we get to a deal. But the European countries are looking at this and they're saying this simply isn't fast enough or good enough. We've seen what the Iranians are able to do. We've seen their mode of operation in the past, and we want action, and we want it now. And if we don't see that action, we're going to take action on our own, and we're going to do so immediately. The United States, Marco Rubio, gets behind this and says clearly, we support
HTVC intelligent camera is specially designed for 24-hour real-time surveillance, which is capable to detect targets, either human or vehicle. HD daylight camera can give a wide searching range and image feature collection. Using advanced thermal imaging detectors with clear imaging, easy to conceal. Free from influencing by outside lighting during operation, and this machine possess wide power range, which easy to connect and operate, and also to ensure convenient in control.
We support this course of action. President Trump comes out with an interesting statement stating that he's not actually sure that this agreement is enough. He wants to capitalize on the damage from the Israeli and American attack on Iran and have a more comprehensive and dramatic agreement with the Iranians. But all in all, this is a very dramatic shift of events that is showing that the global community wants to make sure that we don't exit this summer season without a clear, decisive supervision mechanism and agreement with the Iranians that takes away their ability for nuclear weapons. Last week, a report by the International Science and Security Organization came out and indicated that Iran has yet to start retrieving and rebuilding their nuclear facilities. They're specifically focusing on satellite imagery analysis of the Isfahan facility, in which, according to their analysis, the Iranians have yet to start to dig out the debris and try to retrieve their enriched uranium stockpiles. Now, let me remind you, the Iranians had enough stockpiles of enriched uranium to likely build close to 10 bombs with just a little more enrichment of process. That was before, of course, the Israeli and American attack on them. And once that attack took place, we're not exactly sure, and apparently also the Iranians are not exactly sure, how much enriched uranium they have in their hands and how much is buried underground. So this report indicates that the Iranians have yet to start retrieving these stockpiles of enriched uranium. Interestingly enough, last week in the meeting between Prime Minister Netanyahu and President Trump, one of the main topics that was discussed was how to continue applying pressure to the Iranians to make sure an agreement is reached where they have no more enriched uranium and no desire or ability to continue pushing for a bomb. One of the things Prime Minister Netanyahu continuously talked about with President Trump and has also talked about publicly is the fact that the pressure of sanctions must maintain on the table because the Iranians have been known to go back to enriching time and time again in the past. And even this dramatic series of attacks that Israel and the US carried out against Iran isn't a guarantee that they won't try to rebuild their nuclear program. So sanctions must come if they don't reach an agreement. And at the same time, we've seen that they haven't actively started rebuilding or retrieving their enriched uranium stockpiles. So we haven't talked about what the Iranians have said to this ongoing pressure, now both by the Europeans, the Americans, and the Israelis sort of in the background. Their Foreign Minister Arakchi has said clearly that this intervention and pressure by the European community, one, will be the end of the European involvement in the deals with Iran, and two, will be an irreparable tear in the relationship with the Europeans. That is to say, they're very unhappy with the pressure, if you really look at what they're trying to say. And in essence, everything that's been happening just indicates that the world hasn't lost touch with the fact that Iran has spent decades trying to build a nuclear program. It also hasn't lost connection to the fact that the Iranians, when unsupervised and when there isn't a substantial pressure on their head in the negotiation process, have always in the past been able to go back, remove the sanctions to a certain degree, and start rebuilding their nuclear program. And now the European community, the Americans, and of course Israel, are concerned and vigilant to make sure that whatever agreement is reached in a way where the Iranians don't go back to building a nuclear program, and moreover, they give up their enriched uranium stockpiles. We're looking at a couple very tense weeks ahead of us. If the deadline set by the European countries is the end of August, that's about 5 or 6 weeks ahead of us in which the agreement has to be reached. And that is a very short timeline for such an agreement in any situation, definitely when you're talking about something so delicate and complicated as sanctions and, of course, giving up a nuclear program that the Iranians have spent decades and tens of billions building. So we're looking at a tense season, we're looking at an important season, and one that will reshape the region that we're living in. Now guys, I want to remind you, if you want to keep hearing the truth of what happens in this region and keep hearing reports from the ground in Israel from our entire team, make sure to like, to share, and to subscribe. It helps us bring the truth of what's happening here to people around the world. Make sure you check in for the next report. I'm Mati Shoshani. Now back to Yair Pinto for the rest of the report.
So thank you very much, Mati, for everything that you told us just now and helped us understand. And now, let's move quickly to the reports coming to us from Lebanon, where the local government is trying to detach itself from Hezbollah terrorist organization. But first, I want to invite you once again to hit that subscribe button so that you remain tuned to the truth in real time. Guys, Israeli Air Force fighter jets launched a wave of strikes deep inside Lebanon's Bekaa Valley on Tuesday morning, hitting camps of the Radwan force, which, if you remember, is the elite strike force of Hezbollah, who are supposed to launch attacks into Israeli communities in the Galilee. That never happened, but Hezbollah hasn't given up on their dream of carrying out a massacre in the Galilee like Hamas carried out in southern Israel on October 7th of 2023. That's what these strikes on Tuesday were all about, shutting down the Hezbollah dream. The IDF says that the military camps that were struck are used by Hezbollah to conduct training and instruction of militants for planning and carrying out terror operations against IDF forces and against the State of Israel. As part of the training and the instruction, the militants practice shooting and drills using various types of weaponry, but they won't be doing that any longer, at least not at these camps. Once again, as a reminder, Hezbollah's Radwan unit is the unit that for years planned and advanced the Galilee conquest plan, or maybe plan is the wrong word. Maybe it's better to call it a fantasy of some sort because it didn't happen. In any case, the unit's commanders were eliminated in September 2024 in Beirut and southern Lebanon during Operation Northern Arrows. And since then, the unit has been working to rebuild its capabilities. They're apparently not interested in building anything positive for the future. All they want to do is continue making plans to tear down the positive things that other peoples are trying to build. As long as they keep doing that, Israel will have to keep breaking up their plans. And on that note, the unit advanced the main ground threat that Hezbollah built, and IDF forces have in the past 2 years alone been acting against that unit, preventing it from rebuilding and regaining strength.